The sound of the earth falling against Ethan's coffin echoed like gunshots inside my chest, each thud a cruel reminder that my world had been buried 6 feet under. The priest's words blurred into meaningless fragments, drowned out by the storm of grief clawing at my throat. Around me, mourners wore black, but none seemed as drenched in loss as I was. I clutched the edges of my coat, as though holding myself together was the only thing preventing me from collapsing into the dirt with him. Ethan had been my anchor, and now, even the ground beneath me felt unsteady. I could feel the stares, pity, judgment, curiosity, all tangled together like vines choking me. The wind cut through the cemetery, icy fingers against my face, but nothing compared to the hollow chill inside my bones. My mother stood a few steps away, her hand trembling on my father's arm, but she didn't meet my eyes. Clara, however, stood further back, her expression unreadable, lips pressed in a line too thin to be mistaken for grief. I wondered, with a pang of bitterness, if she had come for Ethan at all, or simply to be seen. My nephew Noah tugged at her dress, too young to understand the gravity of death, and I envied him. I envied that innocence, that oblivion, because right now, awareness was agony. When the final prayer ended, I felt like I had been abandoned in a room where all the air had been sucked away. People offered me words that tasted like ash. He was a good man. Time heals all wounds. You're strong. You'll get through this. Strength felt like a cruel joke. Strength had nothing to do with breathing when the love of your life was no longer breathing himself. I forced polite nods, my face a mask for the crowd, but inside, I screamed. I wanted everyone to leave, to stop seeing me as a tragic spectacle. My grief was not for public consumption. It was raw, ugly, private, and it devoured me whole. When I finally returned home, the house smelled of flowers and candle wax, suffocating in their attempt at comfort. Every corner of the living room screamed Ethan, the jacket still hanging by the door, the coffee mug he had left on the counter 2 days before, the faint trace of his cologne on the couch. I traced my fingers over the worn spine of his favorite book, as though by touching it, I could summon him back, but the silence that answered me was deafening. I sat down, my body heavy, my mind reeling with the grotesque reality that no matter how much I wished, he would never walk through that door again. And then, the message came. My phone buzzed, a cruel interruption in the stillness. It was Clara. The screen glared back at me with words that sliced through my haze of grief. Don't forget Noah's birthday tonight. He deserves a celebration no matter what happened today. It would mean a lot if you came. My hands trembled. The audacity of it nearly made me drop the phone. Just hours after burying my husband, my sister thought it appropriate to remind me of cake and balloons. I wanted to scream at her, to ask her if she had lost her mind. But a small voice inside me whispered, Noah was innocent. This wasn't his fault. I sat with the phone in my lap, torn between fury and obligation. Clara's words lingered like poison, but my love for Noah softened the sting. He had always been a bright spot, running to me with sticky fingers and unfiltered laughter that even Ethan adored. Could I deny him joy because of my pain? Could I let Clara's cruelty overshadow the child's innocence? I thought of Ethan's gentle voice, the way he always urged me to put love above pride, and it broke me. Against the pounding in my chest, I typed a single word back. I'll come. My hand shook as I hit send, already regretting it. The hours blurred between my decision and the moment I forced myself to prepare. I moved mechanically, as though my body no longer belonged to me. I traded my black dress for something muted, but the grief still clung to me like a second skin. Every mirror I passed reflected a stranger. Hollow eyes, gaunt cheeks, lips pressed tight as though holding back rivers of sorrow. My hands fumbled with my hair, but no amount of grooming could disguise the fact that I was a widow. The label felt carved into my forehead, and I dreaded how the world would see me. Pitiful, fragile, broken. On the drive to Clara's house, the city lights blurred past, indifferent to the storm raging inside me. The world continued as though Ethan's death was nothing more than a passing footnote, and that realization deepened the ache in my chest. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white, my heart a drum of grief and dread. What awaited me at that party? Would Clara show me an ounce of compassion? Or would she, as always, find a way to twist the moment into her stage? I tried to steady my breathing, whispering to myself that this was for Noah, not for her. When I finally pulled up to the house, laughter spilled through the windows like a cruel contrast to the silence I had just left behind. Children shrieked in delight. Balloons swayed against the ceiling. and music throbbed faintly in the distance. My stomach knotted as I sat in the car, frozen, staring at the house that belonged to my sister but never felt like home. For a moment, I considered leaving, driving away, escaping this impending storm. But Noah's smile flashed in my mind, and Ethan's memory anchored me once more. With a deep breath that felt like swallowing glass, I opened the door and stepped into the lion's den. The moment I stepped inside Clara's house, the warmth of the lights and the hum of laughter crashed over me like an unwelcome wave. The scent of frosted cake and fried food filled the air, clashing violently with the bitter taste of soil and lilies still lingering in my throat from Ethan's funeral. I felt out of place, like a shadow wandering into a carnival. My eyes caught Noah immediately, his little face lighting up when he saw me. He bolted across the room, his arms wrapping around my waist, and for a fleeting moment, my heart softened. His innocence was a shield, however fragile, against the cruelty of the night. But then I saw her, Clara, standing at the center of the room, radiant in a crimson dress that demanded attention. Her smile was wide, too wide, and it wasn't for me. It was the smile of someone who had already won. She raised a glass, laughing too loudly, her voice carrying above the noise. People gravitated toward her effortlessly, as though she were the sun, and I was nothing but a cold shadow in her orbit. When her eyes finally landed on me, they narrowed, a flicker of satisfaction dancing there. She didn't need to say it out loud. I was the spectacle, the widow who had dared to come. I held Noah tighter, his little hand squeezing mine, grounding me in that moment. "You came," he chirped, his voice bubbling with joy, and my heart cracked. I managed to smile, though my lips trembled, and whispered, "Of course I did, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss your birthday." His innocence disarmed the hostility I felt brimming around me. For him, I could endure this circus. He tugged me toward the cake table, eager to show me the mountain of presents wrapped in bright colors. Each box screamed life and celebration, mocking the black emptiness I carried within. Still, I let him guide me, for his sake. As we moved, I felt eyes follow me. The guests, neighbors, family friends, distant relatives, glanced at me with curiosity that bordered on cruelty. Their whispers were low, but I heard them anyway. "She buried her husband today. Can you believe she came here?" Each word was a dagger, twisting deeper into the wound already carved in me. My breath caught in my throat, and I wished for invisibility. But Clara thrived on visibility, and I could feel her pulling the strings, orchestrating every glance, every whisper, feeding the narrative she wanted, that I was broken, desperate, pathetic. I tried to focus on Noah, to drown out the whispers and the suffocating weight of judgment. He beamed as he showed me his new toy car, his laughter loud and pure. For a moment, the noise of the party softened, and all I could hear was his joy. I bent down to hug him again, pressing my cheek to his, breathing in the simple, sweet smell of childhood. This was why I had come. For him, not for her, not for anyone else. And yet, in the corner of my eye, Clara loomed like a predator waiting to pounce. It didn't take long for her to strike. As the chatter lulled, Clara clinked her glass, demanding attention with theatrical flair. The room fell into a hush, all eyes turning to her as she held the microphone that Noah's little party DJ had set up. Her gaze slid deliberately toward me, her smile curling like smoke. My stomach tightened, dread coiling within me like a serpent ready to strike. I knew her. I knew the way she moved, the way she waited for silence, for an audience, before delivering her blows. My hand instinctively reached for Noah's, bracing myself for the storm. Her voice dripped with false sweetness as she began. "Before we cut the cake," she announced, "I just want to say how grateful I am to everyone who came tonight to celebrate my precious Noah, especially my dear sister Arya, who somehow managed to join us, even after such a difficult morning." The pause, heavy and deliberate, was a dagger dressed in silk. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, sympathy mixed with discomfort, and I felt my cheeks burn. Clara's eyes locked on mine, unblinking, daring me to flinch. She wasn't finished. Not yet. Her words slithered into the silence. "It takes a strong woman to leave behind grief, even for just a few hours, to be here tonight. But maybe it also takes someone who needs distraction. Someone who doesn't want to be alone." Gasps flickered through the crowd, and the weight of her insinuation crushed down on me. She was painting me as weak, as needy, as the widow who couldn't bear her own emptiness. My hands trembled, my chest a battlefield of rage and humiliation. I wanted to scream, to shout, to run, but I stood frozen, tethered by the eyes watching every twitch of my body. Noah looked up at me, confusion clouding his little face. "Auntie?" he whispered, his voice too innocent for the cruelty swirling around us. My throat tightened, words dying before they reached my lips. The party, the lights, the laughter, it all blurred into a sickening whirl. Clara's triumph gleamed in the spotlight, her voice echoing through the room, and I realized that this was never about Noah's birthday. This was about me, about her power over me, about the cruel stage she had been waiting years to construct. And I, shattered and grieving, had walked straight into her performance. The room was silent for a moment after Clara's words, the kind of silence that screams louder than any applause. I felt every gaze pressing into me, dissecting me, waiting for me to shatter. My hands curled into fists at my side, nails digging into my palms as I forced my body to stay upright. I wanted to run, to hide, to curl into the darkness where grief had already swallowed me whole. But the weight of Clara's stare held me hostage. My sister had always been this way, performing, thriving on the discomfort of others, molding herself into the star of every cruel play. I tried to breathe, but every inhale tasted like poison. The laughter and whispers resumed around me, thin veils over their discomfort. I caught snippets. She looks so fragile. Poor thing. But why would she come here? Each sentence was a scalpel, cutting deeper into wounds that hadn't even begun to heal. And through it all, Clara beamed, basking in the spotlight she had created. I felt myself shrinking, my body betraying the strength I once thought I had. My heart hammered, not from fear, but from the rage of knowing she had planned this moment long before today. My mind couldn't help but tumble backward, to the days when we were children. Clara had always wanted everything to herself, the best dresses, the newest toys, the attention of our parents. If I excelled in school, she would mock me until I doubted my own worth. If I made friends, she would steal them, turning their laughter into her currency. Our mother would shrug it off as sibling rivalry, but I knew even then that Clara didn't just want to win, she wanted to destroy. And now, standing in her home, humiliated before dozens of eyes, I saw the same little girl who once ripped apart my drawings just to see me cry. But this wasn't the same battlefield. I wasn't a child anymore, and the stakes were much higher. I had just buried Ethan, the one person who had taught me what love and safety meant, and Clara was using my raw grief as her weapon. She wasn't content with my pain. She wanted ownership of it. She wanted to expose it, twist it, and parade it like a trophy. As I stood there, watching her soak in the attention, I felt a rage bubbling inside me that I hadn't known existed. My grief had made me weak, but maybe it could also make me unbreakable. Noah tugged at my hand again, his little eyes searching my face. "Auntie, are you okay?" His voice was the thread that held me together in that moment. I bent down and kissed the top of his head, whispering, "I'm fine, sweetheart." But my voice cracked, betraying the storm inside me. Clara watched the exchange, her lips twisting in a smug grin, as though even Noah's affection was another prize she had stolen. The crowd began to move again, the tension dissolving into awkward laughter, but I stood frozen, my heart pounding with a truth I didn't want to admit. Clara's cruelty wasn't just about me, it was about power. I remembered the day Ethan had first met Clara. He had smiled politely, trying to connect with her, but she had dismissed him, her charm failing to mask the envy in her eyes. She envied everything about us, our love, our laughter, the life we were building together. Ethan used to tell me, "She's threatened by what she can't control," but I never fully understood until now. Even in death, Ethan was a threat to her because his memory lived inside me, and she couldn't take that away. So she chose tonight, this party, to strip me bare in front of everyone, to prove that she still held the reins of my pain. I tried to steady myself, to remember who I was beyond this moment. I wasn't just Clara's sister, and I wasn't just a grieving widow. I was Arya, someone who had loved deeply, who had built a life with a man worth mourning, who had come here tonight for a child who deserved joy untouched by cruelty. Clara could humiliate me, yes, but she couldn't erase who I was. That thought, fragile as it was, gave me the strength to stand taller, to lift my chin, even as my eyes burned with unshed tears. Still, the question haunted me. Why now? Why this need to break me so publicly, in the middle of her own son's birthday? Was it really about envy? Or was there something deeper, something I hadn't yet uncovered? Clara was never cruel without purpose. Her venom always hid an agenda. As I watched her glide across the room, hugging guests, laughing like she hadn't just gutted me, I knew this was only the beginning. The humiliation was her opening move, but the real game was still ahead. And I wasn't sure I was ready for the war she was about to unleash. I excused myself quietly, slipping toward the hallway, needing air, needing space. The walls of Clara's house felt like they were closing in, suffocating me with every memory of our rivalry, every scar she had carved into me. My fingers brushed against Ethan's wedding band on my hand, the metal cool and grounding. "Help me," I whispered inside my heart, as though he could still hear me from wherever he was. I didn't know what Clara's next move would be, but something inside me shifted in that moment. I was done being her victim. If she wanted war, then she had just awakened an enemy she couldn't predict. I lingered in the dim hallway, my back pressed against the wall, as though it could absorb the tremors in my body. From the living room, laughter echoed, shallow and sharp, a cruel reminder that the world moved on, even when mine had stopped. I wiped at my eyes, determined not to let Clara see me broken, yet I felt the cracks spreading inside me. My mind replayed the sting of her words over and over, each echo louder than the last. How could a sister delight in my suffering? How could she turn Ethan's death into a spectacle? A part of me wanted to storm back in, to scream, to burn the room with the truth of my grief. But another part whispered, "Wait, watch." Clara was playing a game, and I needed to know the rules before I struck back. The hallway felt suffocating, so I opened the side door and stepped onto the porch. The cool night air clung to my skin, heavy with the scent of cut grass and cigarette smoke drifting from the neighbor's yard. My hands shook as I reached for my phone, almost out of instinct, as if Ethan's name might still light up the screen. But it didn't. It never would again. I scrolled through old messages anyway, reading his words as if they were scripture. "You're stronger than you think," he had written once, after a fight with Clara that left me in tears. My breath hitched. Stronger than I think, maybe. But was I strong enough for this? I went back inside only to find Clara standing at the center of the room again, microphone still in hand. She was radiant, glowing in the artificial lights, her red dress hugging her frame like armor. Around her, the crowd buzzed, drawn to her magnetic cruelty. She tapped the microphone and cleared her throat, ready to speak again, and my heart dropped into my stomach. I knew her too well. She wasn't done. She never stopped when she tasted blood. "Family is everything," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "And that's why tonight is so special, because we're all together, even those who don't belong." Gasps rippled through the room as her eyes locked on mine. My chest tightened, rage and shame colliding like storm clouds. I could feel dozens of faces shifting toward me, judging, analyzing, pitying. Clara smiled wider, feeding off the silence. "Some people," she continued, "like to play the grieving widow. But what they don't tell you is that not everything about their perfect marriage was what it seemed." Her words sliced through the air like knives. My blood went cold. I wanted to scream, to demand what she meant, but my voice caught in my throat. She was leading somewhere darker, and I couldn't stop her. The whispers started immediately. What does she mean? Is she saying Ethan? My ears rang with the sound of speculation. Clara tilted her head, playing coy, pretending to decide whether or not to spill the poison on her tongue. She relished the suspense, the tension she had crafted. I clenched my fists at my sides, nails biting into skin, praying she would stop before she crossed a line that couldn't be undone. But Clara had never known when to stop. Her hunger for power was insatiable, and humiliation was her favorite currency. Before she could speak another word, Noah ran to her, tugging at her dress. "Mommy, stop," he said, his voice loud, clear, unfiltered. The entire room froze. My heart swelled with equal parts pride and heartbreak. He was a child, yet he had more courage than the adults who watched in silence. Clara's face faltered for a split second, her smile twitching, her mask slipping. She grabbed Noah's arm, too tightly, and whispered something sharp into his ear. He flinched, his little face crumpling, and my blood boiled. Clara might hate me, but dragging her son into this battlefield was a cruelty I couldn't ignore. I stepped forward, my voice trembling but loud enough to carry. "That's enough, Clara." The room shifted, a collective inhale as if waiting for her to retaliate. My chest rose and fell in quick bursts, my anger finally bubbling over. "You've made your point. You always do. But this isn't about me. This is Noah's birthday, and you're turning it into a circus." My words hung in the air, fragile but firm. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes. She didn't like being challenged. Not here, not in front of her audience. Clara recovered quickly, though, her smile sharpening like glass. "Oh, sweet sister," she cooed. "You've always been so dramatic. Maybe grief is making you paranoid." She laughed lightly, and a few guests followed suit, desperate to dissolve the tension. But her laughter didn't erase the truth. I saw the venom behind her words, the calculated malice. This wasn't random cruelty. This was war, carefully planned, and she wasn't improvising. She was setting me up for something larger, something she'd been waiting to unleash for years. I could feel it in my bones. I wanted to shout, to drag her truth into the light before she could weaponize it against me. But the words died on my tongue, because deep down, I realized something horrifying. There were things about Ethan, about our marriage, that Clara might actually know. Things I had buried, secrets I had sworn to protect even from myself. As Clara's eyes glinted with triumph, I felt the weight of those secrets rise to the surface like corpses breaking through the water. And in that moment, I wasn't sure who would destroy me first, Clara's lies or the truth I was hiding. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the soft hum of the microphone in Clara's hand. My throat ached. My heart pounded against my ribs like it wanted to escape. But I stayed rooted in place, staring at her. She tilted her head, savoring the moment, letting the tension stretch so tight that it felt like the entire party was holding its breath. I knew that look. It was the same one she wore when we were children, and she found some secret of mine to twist against me. Except this time, it wasn't about stolen toys or jealous whispers. This time she was poised to tear apart the memory of my husband in front of everyone. "Arya," she said softly, her voice laced with venom that only I could truly hear. "You've always liked playing the victim. Poor Arya, left behind, abandoned, misunderstood. But tell me, have you told anyone here about Ethan's little secrets?" The words struck like thunder. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, curiosity sparking, eyes darting between us. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. She was circling closer to the truth, and I had no idea how far she was willing to go. I shook my head, willing myself to respond, to defend, but my voice wouldn't come. Clara smiled wider, sensing the paralysis. "You see," she continued, pacing like a predator, "Ethan wasn't the saint you want everyone to believe he was. He wasn't the devoted husband, the perfect partner. No, Ethan had a side you hid from everyone. Didn't he, Arya?" Gasps punctuated her words, the guests clinging to each syllable like spectators at a bloody sport. My skin crawled. She knew something. She couldn't know everything, but she knew enough. For a brief moment, I wondered how. How had she learned what Ethan and I had kept locked behind closed doors? The arguments, the distance, the nights I sat awake while he disappeared into himself. Had I spoken in weakness once, confessed something to her in a drunken slip years ago? Clara had always been waiting for ammunition, storing away fragments until the day she could use them. And now, she was piecing them together to craft a weapon sharp enough to cut through my grief. "I remember," Clara said, her voice turning syrupy sweet, "the times you came to me crying, pretending everything was fine but unable to hide the cracks. Don't deny it, Arya. You told me once that Ethan had a temper, that he scared you sometimes. Do you remember? Or should I remind everyone here?" My heart dropped. She was telling the truth, or at least a twisted version of it. Yes, Ethan had his demons. Yes, his voice could shake walls when his anger broke free, but he had never been the monster she wanted to paint him as. He was complicated, wounded, haunted by battles he fought silently. The guests' faces blurred before me, their whispers growing louder, swelling into a chorus of suspicion. My mouth went dry, and I could barely feel my own hands. Clara had cornered me, placing me in a cage of my own secrets. I wanted to scream, to claw at her lies, but the truth was tangled in there too, and exposing it felt like betraying Ethan's memory. That was her brilliance, her cruelty. She didn't need to invent stories, just sharpen the ones that already existed. And now, she was dismantling me piece by piece, with nothing but my silence to seal the deal. Noah, still clutching his paper crown, stood off to the side, his wide eyes fixed on his mother. "Mommy, please stop," he begged again, his voice trembling. The innocence in his plea sliced me open deeper than Clara's words ever could. He didn't understand the poison dripping from her mouth, but he could feel the wrongness of it, the ugliness staining his birthday. For the first time, A few of the guests seemed uneasy, shifting uncomfortably, glancing at Clara as though maybe she had gone too far. But she ignored him, intoxicated by her own performance. I took a step forward, my legs heavy, my chest burning with a fire I could no longer contain. "Clara," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "You think you're strong because you know pieces of the truth, but you don't know everything. You never did. And dragging Ethan's memory through the mud on your son's birthday doesn't make you powerful. It makes you cruel." My words cracked the air, slicing through the whispers, forcing eyes back onto me. Clara's smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat, and I held on to that tiny fracture like a lifeline. But her recovery was swift. She leaned in closer to the microphone, her eyes locked on mine, her voice a dagger. "Cruel," she repeated. "No, Arya. What's cruel is lying to everyone about who Ethan really was. What's cruel is pretending you had the perfect marriage when we all know better. And the cruelest thing of all," she paused, letting the silence stretch until it was unbearable, "is hiding the truth about the night he died." The room went utterly still, every face snapping toward me, waiting for an answer I wasn't ready to give. My knees nearly buckled, because for the first time, I realized Clara wasn't bluffing. She knew something about that night, something I had prayed no one would ever uncover. Clara's words pierced the air like a blade, leaving a silence so heavy it seemed to crush my chest. The night he died. My hands trembled, my knees threatened to give way, and for a moment, the room blurred into a haze of faces I couldn't distinguish. She knew something, or she thought she did, and either way, the trap was closing in. My mind spun back to that night, the hospital, the final moments, and how even in my grief, I had sealed certain details away, not because I wanted to lie, but because telling them would have shattered what was left of me. My voice caught in my throat, but the memory of that night broke free like a flood. Ethan had come home late, his shoulders slumped, his eyes bloodshot from the weight of weeks spent battling himself. He wasn't drunk, but there was a weariness to him that felt worse than any substance. I remembered the sound of the door clicking shut, the way he dropped his keys with such force it made me flinch. We argued. I can admit that now. Words sharper than knives, accusations hurled like stones. I told him he was drifting away, that I was already mourning the man he used to be. His reply was silence, the kind that cut deeper than shouting ever could. I tried to hold back my tears, but they fell freely as I relived it. That silence had been the last real exchange between us before everything collapsed. Minutes later, Ethan clutched his chest, his breath shallow, his body folding to the floor like paper. The panic that ripped through me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever known. I called the ambulance. I screamed his name. I pressed my hands against his chest as though my love alone could force his heart to beat again. But the world had already decided. By the time the paramedics arrived, Ethan was slipping beyond reach. The doctors later said it was his heart, weakened by stress, and years of battles I couldn't see. But that didn't erase the guilt that consumed me, that our last words had been poisoned, that my voice had been filled with anger instead of love. It haunted me in every quiet hour of the night, gnawed at my insides when I dared to smile. I kept it buried because speaking it aloud felt like confessing to murder, like admitting I had pushed him closer to the edge with my own hands. And Clara? Somehow she had sensed that truth, the truth I had never shared with anyone. Clara's gaze locked onto me now, her expression triumphant yet merciless. "See?" she said softly, almost gently. She can't even deny it, because she knows. She knows what happened that night. The guests shifted, their whispers crawling over me like insects, suspicion blooming with every breath. They didn't know the details, but the image was enough, me standing guilty while my husband's memory cracked and crumbled before them. My stomach twisted, bile rising. She wasn't going to stop until I shattered completely. I forced myself to straighten, to find a fragment of strength in the rubble inside me. "Yes, Clara," I said, my voice cracking yet loud enough for all to hear. "We argued that night. Yes, it was ugly. And yes, I regret every word. But don't you dare stand here and act like you know the full story. You weren't there. You didn't see me kneeling by him, begging him not to leave me. You didn't feel the way his hand gripped mine, even as his life slipped away. You don't know, Clara. You never will." For a moment, the room fell into a stunned hush. Her lips curled, but her eyes flickered, just barely. I had struck something, pierced through her smug facade. Still, she pressed on, leaning toward the microphone as though my pain were fuel for her fire. "You think those words absolve you? That you can twist it into a love story?" Her voice grew sharper, harsher. No. People should know that the marriage you parade as perfect was nothing more than lies held together by silence. And now the silence has spoken, hasn't it, Arya? Her words echoed in my skull, each one another stone cast at my fragile shield. And yet, in that moment, I realized something. Clara wasn't speaking out of concern for Ethan, or even hatred for me. She was hungry, for control, for dominance, for the satisfaction of dragging me beneath her heel. She wanted to claim victory not just in her rivalry with me, but in rewriting Ethan's memory to fit her narrative. And maybe, just maybe, she feared the truth herself. Because if I exposed her motives, if I unveiled the root of her venom, then she would no longer be the orchestrator of this cruel show. She would be the one exposed. I clenched my fists, feeling a new heat rising inside me. Not grief, not guilt, but defiance. Enough, I said, louder now, my voice filling the space with a strength that surprised even me. You've twisted my pain into your theater long enough. This isn't about Ethan. This is about you, about your jealousy, your bitterness, your obsession with tearing me down. But you should be careful, Clara, because the truth, the real truth, it cuts both ways. The room froze again, all eyes snapping to Clara, waiting, wondering. And for the first time that night, I saw fear flicker across her face. The silence after my words stretched longer than I expected, the kind that makes the air feel heavy, as though every breath requires strength. Clara's eyes darted briefly toward the guests, as if searching for confirmation that they were still on her side. But something about the way she avoided my gaze betrayed her. For the first time, I saw a fracture in her carefully polished mask. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to feel the tide begin to shift, however slightly. And yet, I knew her. Clara was like a snake. Corner her, and she would strike harder. She laughed, sharp and brittle, the sound echoing unnaturally through the microphone. There it is, she sneered. The tragic widow act. Always ready to twist the story to make yourself the victim. But people deserve to know what really goes on behind closed doors. Her voice gained momentum again, fueled by the audience's uneasy energy. I saw heads turning, whispers passing like sparks through dry grass. Clara was feeding them doubt, and doubt could kill me faster than any accusation. I had to move carefully, too soft, and I looked weak, too sharp, and I looked guilty. I swallowed, my heart pounding against my ribs, and let myself meet her gaze fully. If you want to talk about what happens behind closed doors, Clara, I said slowly, then maybe you should start with your own, because you and I both know that you're hiding something you've been running from for years. My voice carried a tremor, but it wasn't fear, it was power. I saw her flinch just slightly, her hands tightening around the microphone. The guests stirred again, sensing a shift. For the first time, she didn't have complete control. Clara recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Don't twist this back on me, she snapped, her words sharper than before. This is about Ethan, about the lies you've spun to make yourself look blameless. Her face flushed red, and her voice wavered for just a fraction of a second, betraying the nerves she tried so hard to hide. I could feel the room leaning closer, their curiosity growing. They had come to watch her destroy me, but now they weren't sure whose side they were on. Suspicion had shifted like smoke in the air, curling around her as well. I remembered the day Ethan had confessed something to me, months before his death. He had sat at the edge of our bed, his face pale, his voice strained with something heavier than fatigue. He told me he had overheard Clara on the phone one evening, her voice low and trembling, speaking to someone she didn't want the family to know about. He hadn't shared all the details, but the way he looked at me made it clear. Clara was entangled in something dangerous, something shameful. Ethan had promised to confront her, but he died before he had the chance. And now, with Clara cornering me, I realized I had the power to finish what he never could. Taking a slow breath, I stepped forward, closing some of the distance between us. Do you really want me to open the doors you've kept locked, Clara? I asked, my voice firm, almost daring her. Do you want me to tell everyone about the phone calls, the strange disappearances, the lies you told your own husband? A ripple of murmurs spread through the guests, their eyes widening, their attention snapping fully to her. For the first time, Clara's lips parted without words ready to pour out. Her face betrayed what her mouth refused to admit: fear. Her mask cracked again, but she tried to salvage it with venom. You're lying, she hissed, her voice quieter now, but too sharp to sound convincing. You'll say anything to save yourself. You're a widow who can't accept her own guilt, so you throw dirt on everyone else to distract from your failures." But her tone no longer carried the same force. Her words felt thinner, weaker, as though she herself didn't believe them. The guests noticed, too, their expressions shifting, their whispers carrying tones of doubt not aimed at me, but at her. Inside, I was trembling. I didn't know the full truth of Clara's secrets. I only had fragments, shadows Ethan had left me with, but it was enough to scare her, enough to shift the balance. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "The difference between us, Clara," I whispered, "is that my grief is real. Yours is a mask, and sooner or later the truth underneath will crawl out on its own." Her face drained of color, and for a moment, I thought she might drop the microphone entirely. The room was holding its breath now, the energy taut and electric. For the first time that night, Clara was the one on trial, her composure fraying, her control slipping. I felt a strange strength building inside me, not just from defending myself, but from finally facing the shadow that had haunted me for so long. Clara had tried to drag me down with her lies, but now the guests were beginning to see who she truly was. And as she stood there, silent and shaking, I realized something chilling. This battle wasn't just about me and her. It was about exposing the very secret Ethan had died trying to reveal. The murmurs around us swelled until it sounded like a hive of restless bees. Everyone was watching Clara now, their eyes narrowed, hungry for cracks in her armor. For so long she had played the role of the perfect sister, the dutiful daughter, the woman who always knew best, and the room had believed her. But tonight, the spotlight burned too hot, and her polished facade was melting. I could almost see the beads of sweat forming on her forehead as she tried to control her breathing. I stood still, heart racing, but determined not to falter. Ethan had died with secrets unspoken, and now it was up to me to drag them into the light. Clara gripped the microphone tighter, her knuckles whitening. "You think you can scare me with half-truths?" she spat, her voice cracking around the edges. "No one here believes you, Arya. They see through your lies. They always have." But her words sounded desperate, not commanding. I caught sight of Aunt Meredith, who had always been one of Clara's strongest allies, tilting her head with suspicion. Clara must have noticed it too, because her jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. For the first time, her audience was slipping away, and she knew it. I felt Ethan's presence beside me, or maybe it was just the memory of him, pushing me forward. He had told me once, in a voice barely above a whisper, that Clara wasn't just cruel, she was dangerous. He had said he overheard her promising someone money, promising silence in exchange for keeping something buried. At the time, I didn't understand, but now his words echoed in my head like a prophecy. I had dismissed it as paranoia, as Ethan trying to make sense of her sharp edges, but tonight, with Clara unraveling, I realized he might have been right all along. "You're wrong, Clara," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "They don't see through me. They see through you. You've been hiding things from this family for years." And Ethan knew. The moment I said his name, a hush fell over the crowd. Clara flinched visibly, as though I had struck her. I took a step closer, lowering my voice but keeping it strong. "He heard the calls. He knew about the debts. And he knew you were planning something that would have destroyed all of us if it came to light." The silence that followed was deafening, every ear straining to catch Clara's reaction. Her face blanched, and for the first time, she lowered the microphone, as though the weight of it was suddenly too much. She opened her mouth but no words came out, only a faint gasp, like a drowning woman surfacing for air. The guests shifted uncomfortably, their doubt growing into suspicion, their suspicion growing into quiet judgment. It was all slipping from her hands, and she knew it. But then, with a burst of feral energy, Clara raised her head and glared at me. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped. "You don't know the things I've done to keep this family afloat." Her words stunned me into silence for a moment, but only a moment. The way she phrased it, "to keep this family afloat," sounded less like a defense and more like an admission. The guests caught it too, a few gasping softly, others exchanging wide-eyed looks. I saw Uncle James lean forward in his chair, frowning deeply, as if piecing something together from his own memories. Clara had always been the one managing the family's finances after our father's death. She controlled the inheritance, the investments, the paperwork. Suddenly, it all clicked. The secrecy, the hostility, the rage. She wasn't just cruel. She was hiding something enormous. I steadied myself and spoke again, carefully. So that's it, isn't it? You've been lying to all of us, manipulating us, pretending to carry the family when in truth you've been carrying your own sins. Ethan knew you weren't protecting us. He knew you were protecting yourself. Clara's face drained of what little color remained, and her hands trembled. The microphone slipped slightly, catching feedback that made several people cover their ears. It was the sound of her control breaking apart, piece by piece, like glass shattering in slow motion. And though I still didn't know the full truth, I knew I was closer than ever. Clara shook her head violently, like a cornered animal refusing to submit. "You think you're righteous, Aria," she hissed, her voice trembling with fury. "But you don't know what it's like to be the one who has to make the hard choices. You sit there mourning your perfect husband, blind to the sacrifices I've made, the deals I've had to strike just to keep this family's name from being dragged through the mud." Her words landed like blows, but they weren't aimed at me. They were confessions spilling out, unfiltered, unable to be stopped. She was cracking wide open before all of us. In that moment, I realized something chilling. Clara's rage wasn't just about humiliating me, or even about silencing Ethan's memory. It was about survival. She had tied herself to something bigger, something darker, and if the truth came out, she would lose everything. Her status, her wealth, maybe even her freedom. The air in the room grew thicker, heavier, as the pieces fell into place. Clara wasn't just cruel or jealous. She was complicit. And as I stood there, the weight of Ethan's last words echoing in my mind, I knew the real battle was only beginning. The walls seemed to close in as Clara's voice echoed, her words jagged and frantic, as if confessing against her own will. I had expected more resistance, more of her sharp defenses, but instead, she looked like a woman crumbling beneath the weight of secrets too heavy to bear. My chest tightened as I realized what Ethan must have carried in silence, the burden of knowing something so vile yet being unable to stop it. My sister's mask had always been polished and unshakable, but now it cracked wide open before all of us. I felt a sick mix of relief and terror, knowing we were inches from the truth. Clara's hands shook violently as she lowered the microphone, her voice dropping into a hoarse whisper, though the room was so silent that everyone heard every syllable. "You think Ethan was perfect, Aria? You think he didn't know what I was protecting you from? He begged me not to expose it, because it would have destroyed you, not me." My blood ran cold at her words, my nails digging into my palms. My sister wasn't just unraveling. She was dragging Ethan into this web, twisting his memory into something I couldn't yet reconcile. The guests leaned forward like spectators at an execution. I felt the floor tilt beneath me as she continued, her voice stronger now, gaining momentum from the horror etched on every face. "Yes, I took money. Yes, I hid the accounts. But it wasn't just greed, Aria. It was survival. Do you think our father left us security? He left us debts, gambling debts you never knew about. I was the one who covered them, the one who made deals so our family wouldn't be ruined. Do you want to know who helped me? Ethan, your golden husband." My breath caught so violently it hurt. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Gasps erupted across the room, some sharp, some disbelieving. Aunt Meredith covered her mouth, shaking her head, while Uncle James muttered something under his breath that I couldn't catch. My entire world spun in fragments, pieces clattering against each other, refusing to fit. Ethan, my Ethan, the man whose funeral I had just left hours ago, the man I thought had been my anchor, was suddenly dragged into Clara's abyss. I wanted to scream at her, to deny it all, but her eyes burned with a strange mixture of triumph and despair that told me she wasn't lying. The room turned into a courtroom, silent jurors hanging on every word, while I stood trial without even realizing it. "Ethan wasn't innocent," Clara pressed, tears spilling now, her voice breaking with both rage and something that almost sounded like grief. "He helped me move the money. He knew exactly where it went. He wanted to keep you blind, Aria, because he loved you too much to let you see what kind of mess we were really in. And now you stand here, painting yourself as a victim, when the truth is, you were always living inside the lie he helped me build." Her words sliced through me like glass. I staggered, gripping the edge of a chair to keep myself upright. My mind screamed that she was lying, twisting, manipulating, but deep inside, fragments of Ethan's quiet late-night calls, his tense silences, his evasive answers, began knitting together into something I hadn't dared face. He had been hiding something from me. That much I had known. But this? To be part of Clara's world? part of her schemes. It felt impossible, unbearable. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. If Clara thought she could break me in front of everyone, she was wrong. The guests shifted restlessly, unease vibrating like static in the air. Children clutched their parents, sensing the storm. The birthday balloons bobbed gently in the corner, a grotesque reminder of what this day had been meant to celebrate. And there I stood, facing my sister, my rival, my mirror in some cruel sense, exposing Ethan, tarnishing him in front of everyone before I had even finished grieving him. Yet, deep inside, I knew this wasn't just about humiliation anymore. Clara wasn't lashing out. She was cornered, desperate, and dragging everyone down with her. The truth was far bigger than us. Clara's voice cracked, almost pleading now. Don't you see, Arya? I didn't do this to hurt you. I did this to protect you, to protect us. But Ethan wasn't strong enough to carry it anymore. That's why he's gone. Her final words sent a shockwave through me, colder than ice, sharper than steel. Was she implying, no, suggesting, that Ethan's death hadn't been the accident everyone believed? The thought roared inside me, devouring everything else. The room froze, no one daring to speak, as if collectively afraid of what had just been unleashed. I looked at her, my voice finally breaking free, ragged and raw. What did you do, Clara? My words echoed across the hall like a bell tolling. Every head turned between us, waiting for her to answer, waiting for her final mask to shatter completely. Clara's lips trembled, her breath shallow, and in that moment, I knew. The next words out of her mouth would change everything forever. The silence was unbearable, as if the world itself held its breath, waiting for the unthinkable. Clara's lips parted, trembling like the words themselves feared to escape. Every eye in the room bore down on her, heavy and merciless, while I stood paralyzed, caught between rage and terror. My heart thundered so loudly I could barely hear her first whisper. Ethan didn't die the way you think. The world tilted as gasps rippled through the hall, balloons swaying like mocking spectators. My knees weakened, but I forced myself to stay upright, clinging to the weight of her words. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear what came next, but it was too late to turn back. Her voice grew sharper, jagged with pain, as if tearing open a wound she had hidden for years. It wasn't an accident. Ethan knew too much. He wanted to come clean, to free himself from the lies we built together. But if he had, everything would have collapsed. You would have lost the house, the life you cling to, even your dignity. He begged me to stop, Arya, begged me to find another way. But there wasn't another way. The silence that followed felt suffocating, pressing down on all of us like a tomb. I shook my head violently, rejecting her words, clutching my chest as if my heart itself was trying to claw out of me. You're lying. You're lying to destroy me, Clara, I screamed, my voice ragged, my throat burning. But the way she looked at me, with sorrow, guilt, and a twisted kind of love, froze me in place. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't reveling in my pain. She was breaking, confessing a sin so unbearable it hollowed her from the inside out. For the first time, I saw her not as my enemy, but as a woman drowning. Clara's tears fell freely now, streaking her carefully painted face until she looked unrecognizable. I didn't mean for him to die, she choked, her voice trembling like a child's. But I confronted him that night. He was ready to go to the authorities, to confess everything. He said he couldn't live with the guilt. We argued, and he stormed out, swearing he would tell you everything. And when he drove away in that storm, I knew he was gone before the news ever came. I might as well have put him in that car myself. Her body shook as she collapsed against the table, sobbing. The guests sat in stunned silence, some clutching each other, others frozen in disbelief. I could barely see through the fog of my tears, but I saw Aunt Meredith's hands pressed over her heart, Uncle James staring blankly into space, and children being ushered out by pale-faced parents. No one knew what to say, how to move. This wasn't just family drama anymore. It was devastation. A wound torn open for the entire world to witness. My husband's death was no longer a tragic accident. It was a consequence of lies, greed, and betrayal too monstrous to bear. I felt my legs give way, and I sank into a chair, numbness spreading like ice through my veins. Images of Ethan flooded my mind, his laugh, his embrace, the way he whispered promises into the night. And now, all of it tainted by Clara's confession. He had carried this secret, this unbearable truth, all while trying to shield me from it. He had died with the weight of it crushing him, and Clara, my own sister, had been the one who pushed him to the edge. I couldn't decide if I wanted to scream, collapse, or disappear forever. Clara lifted her face, eyes red and swollen, staring at me as if begging for forgiveness I could never give. "I'm sorry, Arya," she whispered, barely audible. "Everything I did was for you, even when it destroyed me. I never meant to take him from you." But her words only deepened the chasm between us, because love built on lies is not love at all. My hands shook uncontrollably, and for the first time in my life, I saw my sister not as blood, not as family, but as a stranger who had stolen everything I loved. The room remained frozen. No applause, no accusations, just the unbearable weight of silence. I stood slowly, my body trembling, and faced Clara with all the strength I had left. "You didn't just betray me," I said, my voice sharp as shattered glass. "You destroyed the man I loved. You destroyed our family, and you destroyed yourself." My words echoed in the hall, final and merciless, sealing the truth between us forever. Clara's eyes closed, as if bracing for a blow that never came, but I had nothing left to give her. Not anger, not forgiveness, not even pity. When I finally turned to leave, the room parted like the sea, guests stepping aside in stunned silence. The birthday decorations hung like cruel reminders of innocence lost, of a celebration poisoned by revelations no one could erase. My heart was shattered, my trust obliterated, but as I walked out into the night, I carried only one truth with me. Nothing would ever be the same again. Clara's confession had not just ended Ethan's story, it had ended mine too. The moment I realized the people closest to me were the ones who had broken me the most. If you stayed with me until the very end, if my story touched you, shocked you, or made you feel even a fragment of what I lived through, then don't let this be where we part. There are so many truths, so many secrets, and so many hidden scars still to be told. Subscribe to the channel, share this journey, and walk with me into the next chapter of stories that will leave you thinking long after the words fade. Don't miss what comes next, because sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the true ones.